We're taking a look at 6 players to sell high before week 6. No diamond hands around here, Dave. You don't want to get caught holding the bag, right? You've sold all of your cryptocurrencies and all of your stocks, right? You don't have any of that.
Back in like 2016, I probably sold a little bit too early, but yeah, we're gonna sell at the right time on these players today.
Yeah, we're gonna take a look at 6 players. Dave, why don't you kick us off with your first sell high target here before week 6?
I'll start a little bit obvious here. George Pickens, and obviously we're looking at Deontay Johnson's imminent return. He's going to be back. What he's saying is week 7, so one more week without Deontay Johnson, and then he should be back on the field. Even without Deontay Johnson there, target hog, Deontay Johnson, George Pickens has been pulling a 25% target share, which is 21st in the league. You know, that's not what you want to see from a dominant wide receiver one. If you look at that week 1 outing, you know, Deontay Johnson was knocked out in the third quarter, and prior to Deontay Johnson getting knocked out of the game, George Pickens only had 2 catches for 27 yards. He was being out-targeted by Deontay Johnson 4-6. Right now, if you're looking at George Pickens, he's the wide receiver 13 in PPR. Given where he was getting drafted in fantasy leagues, you're feeling pretty good about that investment, but I'd rather have just about any other top 24 wide receiver. So some guys that I'd be okay flipping him for, Garrett Wilson, Christian Watson. If you're sitting at 5-0 or 4-1 and feeling confident about your team, I might even go out and test the waters and see if I can get Justin Jefferson from a team that could be hurting. Some running backs I'd like, Joe Mixon, Saquon Barkley, Alvin Kamara. The thing that I'm concerned about is George Pickens has this big play ability, but he is going to lose a huge chunk of target share to Deontay Johnson when he comes back.
Yeah, and something, I mean, we also want to hang our hat on the fact that I think I've seen it, you've seen it. Kenny Pickett likes George Pickens. He does.
Yeah.
Like he does go out of his way to just kind of chuck up those 50-50 balls, but the running joke keeps going that George Pickens really has 2 routes in his arsenal right now, and it's not. I don't even know how much of it is him not being able to run other routes, because I do
Matt
think he's a better
Canada
route runner.
just having
That's
a
the
very
thing,
archaic
right?
playbook. Yeah.
Yeah, like I've seen George Pickens be able to run other routes. He's not the best at them, but he can do it. But this playbook with Matt Canada and the Steelers offense, I think that's the bigger sell here, is just the Steelers offense in general. I'm very concerned about them. You got no Pat Freiermuth. Najee Harris has not been anything of what people thought he might be. There's just not a whole lot to be excited about in the Steelers offense right now.
And I think George Pickens, you know, there is a place for him in a fantasy lineup. There's nothing
Oh,
wrong
absolutely.
explicitly with George Pickens. I mean, that type of what he does, like the big play upside, is great to have in fantasy, but more as a wide receiver 2 or a flex option. And right now he's putting up back end 1 wide receiver production. So if you could flip him for somebody that's going to be a little bit more consistent, I'd take the consistency over the boomer bust tendencies that are really going to rear their head when Deontay Johnson is back in the fold.
And we're going to talk about a couple of other players that have a little bit of that boom bust tendency here today. But before we do, if you're enjoying this conversation so far, be sure to like this video and make sure you're subscribed to the channel, okay? When you subscribe to the Football Guys channel, you are going to get our show 4 days a week, Monday through Thursday. We're giving you the trades episode, our start sit episode. We're giving you our waiver wire episode, so much. And then on Sundays, we give you the live Sunday morning start sit, where we're going to answer your questions every single week. And then if you have questions about trades you want to make, lineup decisions, anything like that, drop those questions in the comments below. All right, Dave, I'm going to give you my first sell high candidate. And you and I were joking before the show is that we kind of didn't want to put this guy here because it felt so obvious. And I just said, I don't care. I'm just going to go obvious because you know what? We often do this where we mistake what we think to be obvious to other people. And sometimes that's not always the truth. And so I'm going to go with Adam Thielen, wide receiver for the Carolina Panthers here. And right now he's the wide receiver 10 in fantasy football. Nobody, not a single analyst or player or even Adam Thielen had him as the wide receiver 10 in fantasy football. Right now, I'm going to go over some numbers with you. He's getting 43% of the Panthers receiving touchdowns so far. 43% of the team's touchdowns, despite
that sounds sustainable.
Yeah, right. Despite only having 2 end zone targets. Yeah,
right.
That's the good thing about video and audio. We don't need the sarcasm font here. It's not Twitter. People are still going to get upset, but that's fine. So like that's the thing, right? Is like there's not a whole lot that seems very sustainable here for Adam Thielen in terms of the scoring. Just 2 end zone targets on the season and having nearly half of your team's receiving touchdowns just doesn't seem like something that's going to keep going. You take a look at it, only Cooper Kupp, Devontae Adams, and AJ Brown were able to do that last year. having at least, what's the number here? 43%. Listen, Adam Thielen's a talented receiver. I don't know that that's going to hold up, and he's going to be one of those top 4, top 5 wide receivers in the league, like some of those guys were last year. Now, he has been the first read target on nearly 1/3 of Bryce Young's throws. And what happens when defense start to key in on that? I mean, we talk about this all the time, that rookie quarterbacks, other teams do start to get more film on them. Other teams start to get a little bit better prepared for these rookie quarterbacks. And if we're seeing that, the fantasy football guys are out here seeing that, you have to assume that NFL defensive coordinators are seeing that Bryce Young is looking Adam Thielen's way and looking at him as the first target quite often. Also, Dave, like, this is just a total vibes moment, not data or fantasy football or film or anything. Just the vibes in Carolina are not good right now. They're not good. Team is 0-5. A lot of weird rumors swirling around.
Frank Reich, did you see that press conference? Kind of talking about the hands-on ownership. Kind of looks like he's already making excuses for not wanting Bryce Young. Yeah. Bad vibes.
Yeah, it's all around bad vibes. I don't know that it's going to get much better, and we're not seeing anything from that team right now that gives me a lot of high hopes going forward. So if you can, go and sell the wide receiver 10 right now in fantasy football, Adam Thielen.
And he's another guy that, like, I think makes for a great, like, wide receiver 3, like kind of a volume dependent wide receiver 3. But yeah, if anybody's looking at Adam Thielen thinking that he rewound the clock and that he's like out of the shadow of Justin Jefferson and he's going to continue being a wide receiver 1, yeah, absolutely. Try to flip him if you can.
We're going to keep putting these disclaimers after every single sell high candidate. Is like, because we don't hate the player.
Like, yeah, we're not recommending that you sell these guys that are way down in the rankings. We really went to the top of rest of season rankings to talk about some of these guys.
Well, and that's the point, though, right? Is it's players who are outperforming what we all thought they might do. And then I've been accused of being very literal. Well, let's take this very literally. If you don't expect Adam Thielen to be a top 10 wide receiver rest of season, shrug, it might be time to sell. Just saying. That's just that's just how it should be. All right, Dave, give us your second sell high candidate here.
I can't believe I'm saying this, and I know people are going to be upset about it, but I think that maybe you should try to sell Puka Nacua if you've got him. Again, disclaimer, I'm not saying to sell low on Puka Nacua, all right? Don't panic.
The wide receiver 3. It's the wide receiver 3 overall right now.
Exactly, yeah. And I'm not like, don't go out and like ship off your Puka Nacua for Jaylen Warren. That's not what I'm saying here by any means. But if you look at last week, I think a lot of people are going to see that he finished with more points and that he had a touchdown. And they might think that Puka Nacua is still the wide receiver 1 in Los Angeles. Nacua caught one of Stafford's 2 touchdowns and had more fantasy points. But if you watch that game, Cooper Kupp, even looking a little rusty and not always on the same page with Matthew Stafford, is still very, very clearly the wide receiver 1 in this offense. He led the team in targets, receptions, yards, first downs, first reads. He was Matthew Stafford's guy, and he left a lot of meat on the bone where they weren't able to connect on some deep balls. And I think that as the season progresses and as he shakes off that rust, we're going to see Cooper Kupp go back to the top 3 wide receiver that we have seen for the last couple of years. Nacua had a pretty bad drop. He also had a fumble. And I think that's just going to push Stafford even harder in Cooper Kupp's direction. Now, again, I'm not saying that Puka Nacua is dust and that you need to just ship him off for whatever you can, but if you could flip him for a more consistent wide receiver, right now, like you said, the wide receiver 3 in scoring, a lot of people are going to see that he outscored Kupp last week. So test the waters and see if you can get Keenan Allen, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Brandon Ayuk, CeeDee Lamb, DJ Moore, one of these guys that we know is a bona fide wide receiver 1. Again, Puka Nacua is valuable, and the wide receiver 2 in this high-profile Rams offense is going to have value in fantasy football, but I'd be trying to flip this, what we could see turn into kind of more of a boomer bust wide receiver 2. If you can flip him right now for a wide receiver 1, I'd be trying to do so.
So you kind of already started doing this, and I wanted to see if I can do the litmus test here on like where we're selling.
Yeah, throw some other names out there. Yeah.
So let's do this. I mean, I think we can both agree we'd rather have Jamar Chase over Puka Nacua.
Yes.
Right? Dave, I'm gonna give you your ultimate test: DJ Moore or Puka Nacua.
I said DJ Moore. Yeah. Keenan Allen, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Brandon Ayuk, DJ Moore, and CeeDee Lamb were the names I said I'd be comfortable with.
AJ Brown.
AJ Brown. Yeah, dig him over
Devontae Adams.
Devontae Adams. Yep.
Okay, you said CeeDee Lamb, you said Brandon Ayuk. Let's see, you said Amon-Ra St. Brown.
I think I'd draw the line at DK Metcalf. I'd probably prefer Puka
Ooh,
Nacua over DK
okay.
Metcalf.
Okay. Yeah, I think we're about the same. I think I still value Puka Nacua a little bit higher. I think that he'll still remain in that
Mid to
top
high end wide
15.
receiver too is what I'm looking at him as. Yeah, like
Yeah. I think we're pretty much in lockstep there. I think he's a souped up Robert Woods. It's a
right.
little bit nicer. Should still be roughly a top 15 wide receiver. So what you're
And if you
saying
look
here,
at a
the
lot of rest of
caveat.
season rankings, he's still in that 6 to 8 range. And I don't think that's where he belongs. I think he's more of a 12 to 15 guy, which, like I said, very, very valuable. But if you can
Right.
flip him for a top 10 or a top 12 guy, I'm doing that.
Yeah, then that's the whole idea here, right? Is flipping a top 15 guy for a potential top 5 or 6 guy. Seeing if we can do that. Now, before we go on here, I want to remind all of you, we've got our weekly rankings over on footballguys.com. They are 100% free. Includes myself, Dave, a bunch of the other analysts that we have here at Football Guys. And if you want custom advice tailored to your team and to your league, you can become a Football Guys Pro subscriber. It is only $3.99 a month. We've got the link in the description of this show down below, and it is so easy to join, and everything is custom down to every single player on your roster, the scoring settings, the league, everything. And you're able to do more than just one team. You can fit all of your teams depending on, you might be one of those people that has 10, 12 fantasy teams out there. So head on over to footballguys.com, or you can click the link in the show description.
I never do this. I never keep talking after your reads here, but I do want to say the Football Guys ranking platform is awesome. Like, it could not be easier the way that it color codes. And again, this isn't, you asking me to do this pre-show or anything. This is just me giving my honest opinion. I signed my brother up for it and he's obsessed with it. It shows all the players that are rostered, all the players that are on your team, and all the free agents color coded. And it really is a pretty awesome platform that we just built out this offseason. So this is just me kind of giving my +1 to say go out and sign up if you haven't already.
Yeah, I'm big on the color coding there. I'm not
I'm a
much of
simple
a
man.
reader. Yes, I'm a simple man. I need pop-up books, pretty colors. Like that's what I need.
Hey, this
A lot
player is
of
yellow and
sensory
he's ranked
stuff.
ahead of guy in blue, so I should probably swap out my blue for a yellow. That's how easy we make our rankings here.
Done. Beautiful. I love it. All right, let's move on here. Dave, I'm going to give you my second sell high candidate, and it kind of feels like he's always on these lists. So we'll see how this continues here. Gabe Davis, wide receiver for the Buffalo Bills. He's the wide receiver 14. And it's the same concept as before. If you believe that Gabe Davis is a top 14 or top 15 wide receiver, by all means, keep him. In fact, go buy him if that's what you think, right? But what we're looking at so far is a player that's got 4 touchdowns in his last 4 games. We talked about the Adam Thielen touchdown rate not being sustainable. This is definitely not sustainable. Nearly 40% of Gabe Davis's touchdown fantasy production, is coming off of touchdowns alone. That's quite a bit to keep going. He's got less than a 15% target share, which is 70th amongst wide receivers that have run at least 50 routes this season in the NFL. So there's just a lot of numbers here that don't quite add up. A lot of touchdowns, not a lot of targets. The thing is, though, with Gabe Davis, we knew that this is who he was. Like, this is kind of what Gabe Davis has always been. The argument has always been he can pop off and give you these big boom games, or he doesn't score a touchdown and he gets 2 targets and 1 reception and he has a big bust game. That's going to happen. The thing is that so far he's had 4 boom out of 5 games. Okay. It's all 4 of those games with a touchdown. So the idea here is, unless Gabe Davis is going to give you 16 touchdowns on the season and have an incredible year, it's not likely that he's going to keep giving you these top 10 performances every single week. You look at him on a per game basis right now, he's averaging roughly 3.5 receptions and 64 yards on just 5 targets per game. He's not a bad player. He's not on a bad offense. I think you just have to take into consideration the boom bust nature of this, Dave. And something we've talked about is these guys cashing in on this touchdown production and going and finding players who are getting more targets and finding players who can give you some more consistent volume. Anything you want to add here on Gabe Davis?
Let's just riff a little bit here real quickly, talk about some of the guys
I like
that we've
riffing.
talked about here. Would you prefer Gabe Davis or George Pickens for the rest of the season? Because they're very
Oh,
similar players where they don't
yeah.
draw a lot of targets, but they get big plays and they score touchdowns. Am I crazy to say that I might prefer Gabe Davis ahead of George Pickens
No.
just because we're looking at Deontay Johnson coming back? We're looking at the Buffalo Bills obviously being a better offense. So I think I might prefer Gabe Davis ahead of George Pickens because they're similar players. I'd rather take the guy that's in a better environment with a better quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, the conversation ended for me just looking at the quarterback. It was Josh Allen versus Kenny Pickett. There's
Right.
really nothing else to it. You could throw in all the other stuff and the data and players coming back from injury, whatever. It's Josh Allen versus Kenny Pickett. I'm gonna go Gabe Davis there
So
over
of the
George Pickens.
receivers we talked about real quickly, I think if we had to kind of rank them, it's like Gabe Davis, or I'm sorry, Puka Nacua, Gabe
Yep.
Davis,
Right.
George Pickens, and then Adam Thielen. So if you
Yes.
can kind of move any of these players around, that's kind of I think how we'd rank these receivers so far.
All right, Dave. Get us to your third and final sell high candidate for the show today.
Again, looking at the top of rankings right now, Raheem Mostert is the RB2 in fantasy scoring, and anybody who drafted him is feeling good. Now, I think this is one where there actually is an opportunity to sell because people are going to see, wow, Devon Achane is out. We don't know if it's going to be a week, 4 weeks, a season. They're really keeping everything close to the chest right now, but I think that that's going to induce some panic. And some people are going to see, well, Raheem Mostert is going to be the guy now, and they're just going to think they add Raheem Mostert and Devin Achane together, and you're going to get the RB1 for the rest of the season. Obviously, I'm exaggerating here, but I think people are going to see Raheem Mostert as somebody that you shouldn't look to sell right now and completely forgetting about Jeff Wilson. Jeff Wilson has been a Mike McDaniel guy for years, dating back to their time with the San Francisco 49ers. He's always really liked him, and they're very different types of players. So I was looking last year. When I looked at last year, I'm completely throwing away week one. If you remember, they tried making Chase Edmonds the running back one, and it was just a terrible experience, and they realized almost immediately that they couldn't do that. But from week two onward, we saw Raheem Mostert had
Mhm.
16.8 opportunities in games without Jeff Wilson Jr. In the games with Jeff Wilson Jr., he saw just 11.9. So we were looking at his opportunities per game dropping by 5. He also out-touched him in the red zone 2 of 7 times. So of the games that they played together, 7 total games, Jeff Wilson Jr. had more red zone touches in 5 of those 7 games. So this is my fear, is that Raheem Mostert is going to get some touches, and he's got the big play upside, but he's going to lose out on almost all of the goal line work. So we're looking at somebody getting carries in between the 20s here. We just know that Mike McDaniel loves him some Jeff Wilson Jr. He's a one-cut runner who doesn't shy away from contact, works great in this scheme. So I would flip Raheem Mostert right now as the current RB2, as crazy as it sounds, for just about any top 15 running back if I could. And if I can get a top 24 wide receiver, even some of the guys we talked about, Gabe Davis and George Pickens, I'd prefer them ahead of Raheem Mostert.
Dave, you're so literal. How can you just trade away the top 2 running back right now? That just doesn't make sense. I'm just kidding. Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. I think you are going to still get some good value out of Raheem Mostert over the next 4 weeks, but there's kind of that mystery box quality here with Jeff Wilson. Both of these running backs have experience with Mike McDaniel in San Francisco. Okay, so like that's not a thing. It's like, oh, he's going to favor one guy over the other. But everything that you mentioned, right, and seeing the production last year with Jeff Wilson and some of the goal line carry stuff. Listen, it's tough to see Raheem Mostert sustaining this type of production going forward. If he does, hey, phenomenal, right? And I don't think there's too many people here. And I think there's also a caveat. I don't think there's too many people that have Raheem Mostert on their roster that are going to be willing to ship him away because there is the fear of losing a guy who's just been a top 5 running back for them so often. But if you have the depth on your team and you have some other running backs and you think you can get stronger at a different position, it makes sense. Now,
And
Dave,
we saw
before I
this
get
last
to
year
this,
where,
yeah,
sorry, I was just going to say, Mostert
go for it.
started the year really hot last year. And there was a
Yeah.
point where he was a top 5 running back. And then as soon as they traded for Jeff Wilson Jr. in week 9, we saw the workload reel back. We saw the touchdowns reel back. And then he just kind of became a boomer bust running back too. And I think that's what we're going to see when Jeff Wilson Jr. is added to the mix as soon as this week.
All right, I'm going to get to my third and final sell high candidate here. And Dave, I was also just reminding me before we finish here, we've got a bonus player that I want to talk about. And you, I think you can already, you're reading my mind. I think you already know who it is, but we'll talk about this bonus player at the end. But before I get to that, Alexander Mattison, running back for the Minnesota Vikings. There's a lot of kind of fool's gold going on right now. Okay. He's been a top 20 running back in 4 of 5 games this season. If you just simply look at the fantasy points, Alex Mattison looks like a pretty good fantasy running back.
Mhm.
However, when you start to peek a little deeper, his snap share is going down. He's gone from 79% snap share in week 3. The Vikings make the transaction to bring on Cam Akers down to 51% here in week 5. So it's becoming a 50-50 split here at the running back position in terms of snaps. Mattison, season lows in touches as well. Cam Akers giving you solid production in the run game. You're seeing him rip off runs of 6, 7, 8, 9 yards consistently in this offense. And this is not really praise of Cam Akers, more of just an indictment on Alex Mattison and the fact that I don't really want much of this running back room right now. This is a bad Vikings team. This is a bad Vikings offense that just lost their best player. Exactly. Then there's rumors swirling about Kirk Cousins potentially getting traded. I don't know how much of that is just us just wish casting things or how much of it could actually be real. Either way, we go back to talking about like the vibes about Adam Thielen and the Panthers and what's going on there with Bryce Young and all that. The vibes in Minnesota are really gross right now, but Alexander Mattison has had some, let's just call it fantasy production volume, cologne, whatever we want to call it. And he finally just scored his first touchdown of the season this past week, which by the way, it was a receiving touchdown. Alex Mattison is yet to score a rushing touchdown. And my money on the Alexander Mattison under 7.5 rushing touchdown prop for the season looks awesome good at the moment, Dave.
Oh,
what?
Under.
No,
under. Sorry.
Under. Come on,
he did have a week 1 touchdown. He had that receiving touchdown in week 1 as well, if I recall. Remember that?
That's phenomenal. Still 0 rushing touchdowns. So I'm doing well there. So, but you look at the schedule going forward. It's not just a thing where he's going to lose some of this volume. You start to look at some of the opponents going forward. You got the Niners, the Falcons, the Saints. And Dave, I got to give credit to your Bears. They've actually been better against running backs than people think. They've been pretty solid against the ground game. Where they get beaten is those running backs that are good pass catchers and make things happen out in space. And that's not Alex Mattison. That's not Cam Akers. I don't see that being a problem for them. I want to sell Alex Mattison right now. He got this touchdown last week. Everything's still looking good. He's looking like a top 20 running back to those that are just kind of seeing it from the outside looking in. But if you have Alexander Mattison on your roster, now is the time to ship him out.
Yeah, completely in agreement there. I feel like there have been a few sell windows that have opened up for Alexander Mattison, and this might be the last one after scoring a touchdown last week. So in complete agreement with you there, Alfredo.
Okay, before we finish, this is the bonus guy I wanted to talk about, Dave. Are you ready? Are you ready? It's gonna upset some people, but you and I still remain in agreement on this. Kyren Williams.
Yeah.
I know that
I didn't want to talk about it because we talk about it almost every episode, but yeah.
I think that we both wanted to avoid it. Yeah, we both wanted to avoid it. Just look at the past 3 games. If he's not scoring a touchdown, he's not a top 24 running back. That's the thing. We've been preaching this with all of these other trade candidates. It's about finding players that can be more consistent. Yeah, you want to take the boom bust games as they come, but with Cooper Kupp back into this offense, if Puka Nacua is a guy, Dave, that you're willing to sell, Kyren Williams has to be a guy that you're not just willing to sell, you are actively looking to sell right now. And I know there are a lot of people that have him on their roster and they are very, very happy with what Kyren Williams has done. But think about how he made you feel in week 3 when he was the running back 27. 10 carries for 38 yards, no touchdowns. Yep. Think about how he made you feel in week 5 when he was the running back 32. There's going to be a lot of those games there where he's not going to be a top 24 running back. And I think that if you are the fantasy manager that wants to hold on to him, you've got to be prepared to handle those games.
And I think that buy window or sell window, whatever, I think that might be closed because we've seen 2 of the last 3 games now, he hasn't been great. And we were recommending selling at peak value when he was the RB2 in fantasy, coming off 2 huge games. And we had our listeners reaching out to us and saying, hey, I flipped my Kyren Williams for Travis Kelce and Jamar Chase and AJ Brown and these great players. That was the time to sell. I mean, even now, like I said, 2 sub 10 PPR points in 2 of his last 3 games. I think we've kind of seen the true colors here. We're seeing the workload get peeled back. Eventually we keep talking about Zach Evans possibly getting in the mix. Ronnie Rivers expanding his role.
You keep talking about Zach Evans.
I do like Zach Evans
Don't
a lot.
Don't loop me into that. No.
But either way, I don't know what you're selling him for at this point because people are going to see, wow, he just had his season worst game in the first game Cooper Kupp came back. So I think yesterday, we talked about it a little bit on the audio side of the show, not on the YouTube show. But we talked about Kyren Williams. We all consensus, me, you, and Jagger, had him as our RB24. And I think that's what he is. He's kind of a fringe RB2, RB3 type guy. He's got some value in fantasy lineups, but we also know with Sean McVay's tendencies that workload could just disappear any instant. So maybe more of a hold right now than a sell high. But if you've got somebody looking at that early season production, thinking that he could still be an RB1 for the rest of the season, absolutely trying to sell him there.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're not that far removed from his running back 4 finish here in week 4 against the Indianapolis Colts. And
right.
once again, that's all. It's 2 touchdowns, right? Like that's what's propping him up. But I'm sure you have fantasy managers out there that either just lost Devon Achane, that lost James Conner, that maybe lost Justin Jefferson, and they're saying, okay, I've got to make a move. I've got to get a guy into my running back spot or my flex spot that's going to be able to help me out. Let me see what I can do here. And
there's still some value there. You just aren't getting Jamar Chase anymore.
No, it's
the Jamar Chase window is closed.
Well, there you go, Dave. We did it again. We undersold it and we over delivered. I think that's kind of what we like to do here. But
7
we'll be
sell
back
highs.
tomorrow. Yeah, 7 sell highs. Look at that. We're out here just bringing the value. We're gonna be back tomorrow with our week 6 starts of the week. That's always hard to say.
Sick episode.
Yeah, it's going to be the sickest. We'll be back tomorrow. Big thank you to my co-host, Dave Kluge, our production team, Julia, Dylan, Jagger, and thank all of you for joining us. We'll see you next time. Adios.